Hello everyone, this is part 2 of our series here on Gukesh's best wins. And this one also comes from the Olympiad in 2022 in Chennai. And this features, Gukesh playing with the black pieces against the US's board one Fabiano Caruana. And this is a very interesting game actually, because, we have a Rosslimo Sicilian with b takes c6, which is kind of well known to be a little bit better for white, but Gukesh doesn't really mind so much. He's happy to just get a position and just kind of play and outplay his opponent later. After his move of d6, a normal approach would just be to play c3 and, just take over the center like this. And there's actually a position I've played a few times as black myself in online blitz, where you can often go for moves like c5 and try to get counterplay down this file. We've kind of a quite reasonable position. If white would have played d5, it definitely has very much the feel of a Benko gambit in terms of the pawn structure. But in the game, Caruana decides to play the move e5, looking to ask some questions by messing up the black pawn structure. Where, on the one hand, white is currently sacrificing a pawn, but it's also true that white has pretty good chances to regain it in different ways. He can position the pieces to attack the c5 pawn. If you are enjoying this video and this series, do make sure to leave a like and also to consider subscribing to the channel. If you ding that notification bell, it will actually notify you in your feed when more of these posts in the series, or these videos in the series, are going to be put up. So it'll just make it easier for you that way. I really like the move that Gukesh played in this position, actually. Realizing that the c5 pawn's a dead man walking anyway, he played the move of c4, offering to give back the pawn, where if white does take it, then black can even go f5 and get a very nice dynamic position. And like I said in the previous video, Gukesh has a really great dynamic style, just really good feel for the initiative, and we see that here. And so does Caruana, by the way, where he played the move of knight c3, just allowing him to still be sacrificing a pawn, but realizing that it's not so easy for black to develop his king side without giving back the pawn on e5. Now, you might be wondering, what if black just plays a move like f6 and just prepares to, castle and get the extra pawn that way? But this would actually be a mistake because of the move d4. It might seem very counterintuitive to undouble black's pawns and, leave black a pawn up. The problem, though, is that black just doesn't get time to get his pieces out. Like, you can't even play knight h6 here, because white's just going to take and play queen f6 and use the pin to completely leave the black king stuck in the center here. And if you don't have knight f6, well, how else are you getting the pieces out? Like, if e5, there's queen c4, and even when you do play knight e7, you're still not ready to castle. So this is just really going to be very bad for black, essentially. Computer in points out some pretty spectacular moves, but I think a simple plan like rook d1 and bring to knight d6 will be pretty effective in ending black's resistance, let's say. So that's why you just have to give back the pawn one way or another here as black, and Gukesh did that with the move knight h6. If you're wondering why it's giving back the pawn, it's because Caruana played knight e5, realizing that, the exchange of knights is pretty obviously in white's favor, in that, the black king is not really able to castle, which is a problem here. So knight f5 is played, bishop f4, and so far we can say that Caruana has won the opening battle, that this position here is better for white. Black does have some weaknesses on the queen side, and white does have a pretty good grip over the dark squares after the move of d4 in the game. In fact, the position reminds quite a bit of a line of the symmetrical English, which I'm not sure how many of you guys are going to be familiar with it, but if I go back to the starting position and let's say I put in this sort of Grunfeld style line on the board, something like g6, e3. There's going to be a bit of a long line, so just bear with me for one moment. But say if we have something like this with, something like, let's say, e6, bishop b5. Say we have this sort of position like castles. Like, you might notice that this sort of structure has a lot of similarities to the one that comes up in the game, where we see, here there are some differences. We can see the point that black has the weak queenside pawns, and white has a very strong grip on the dark squares with the knight versus light squared bishop imbalance. So realizing that, a move like rook d8 is normal, but still, is allowing white to just have very good pressure in any case. And yeah, it's worth knowing, knight d4, you can't actually take the pawn here because of queen c4 will win material as such. But yeah, this is why Gukesh realized, okay, my position isn't so great here, so we need to try and turn the trend of the game in some way. Something I wrote about in a recent Facebook post of mine, actually, about the different ways in which you should defend a position, depending on the nature of the opponent's moves, like whether it's just an idea, or whether it's an attack on your king, or whether it's just a direct threat, how our defensive approach may vary. And because white's approach is more likely just has some good ideas, like knight c5 is it's a nice move for white to play, but it's not like, a winning threat by any means. It means that our approach is going to be more towards like changing the trend of the game when whatever way we can. And this g4 and trying to hit the center is a good example of that. Now, you might be wondering, well, Max, after knight c5, can't they just take the b2 pawn? Yeah, they can, but it turns out that the fact that the black bishop and, by extension, a black rook are completely stuck here, this proves to be more important than the fact that white is currently down a pawn. And you're also going to kick away the queen, and black is effectively playing without many of his pieces at this point, but I will admit, it's not the easiest thing in the world to appreciate, without the engine turned on. And Caruana's move rook e4 to stop g4 is definitely not bad either, just taking a more prophylactic approach. After queen to d7, this is a really nice move by Gukesh. He realized that, okay, the pieces aren't so great at the moment, so we need to try to reroute them in some way. Queen c2, rook f7, both sides just getting the pieces to good squares. I really like this move of bishop f8 that black played, where you're preparing for the bishop to get more active, but you're also preparing for the rook to potentially come into the attack. And it's a very tense position. Both players are using a lot of time on their clocks. I don't have the clock times on me in this exact, game, but I remember I was watching this game live at different points, and I saw it already here, like they were down to like 20 to 30 minutes each, with the time control being at move 30. Now, the move that Caruana played at queen c4 is not a mistake, but I think it's worth pointing out there was a very interesting alternative to play knight takes g5. I'm very impressed by the way if the move even occurred to you, because it's definitely not the most human one, but kind of a nice point that we do get free pawns for the piece, and the black king being so weak, and white just having this kind of easy sort of build up. It is actually going to be a very good position for white here. Black cannon should, offer the trade the queens to beat back the attack. But, yeah, it turns out white even has just a very nice long-term compensation. Again, just using those dark squares to his advantage. And, of course, I mentioned the rook can also swing in different ways to the attack. But, yeah, in the game, queen c4 was played. The move queen b7 was black's response, eyeing the pawn on b2. White defended with b4, which in hindsight might have given black a little bit of a target, where a move such as knight a4 and just playing on those dark squares might have been a bit more reliable in hindsight. Because after b4, e6 and something white has to figure out a way to defend this pawn. Because if you play a move like a3, for example, then a5 comes, and we can sort of feel how the b4 and the a3 pawns are a little bit weak all of a sudden here. So after e6, white plays move rook b1, putting the rook opposite the queen to stymie the idea of a5 for the moment. I mean, to be fair, you could still play it anyway. Like, you do end up getting the pawn back. It's not the biggest problem in the world, but okay, it's a little bit computerish, I guess, to just sack a pawn randomly like that. Whereas I think the move that Gukesh played, queen e7, is just a lot more natural from a human point of view. Just get out of the way of the rook and prepare a5 with a little prophylaxis, as it were. White played rook b1, queen b7. The players repeated moves a bit, and based on the rating difference, like it's a 100-point rating difference between the players. This explains, I think, a little bit why also Caruana, didn't just take a draw, but decided to keep the game going. Maybe a4 might have been a better try here, but he played the move a3 in the game. Which, if you give white time to play like queen to d3 or like knight a4, c5 especially, this grip on the dark squares is going to be quite tough for black, but the move a5 sort of disrupts that quite nicely, where, now again, like ba5, rook a5 leaves this pawn a bit weak, and, a4, bishop a6, we can really feel the black piece starting to come to life. Well, turns out you're even winning the exchange with bishop d3. That's a nice little bonus there. So that explains a little bit why white played knight a4, going for the fork. Of course, black covered it, queen d8. B takes a5 was played. Note, by the way, that white doesn't have queen c6 here, because bishop d7, a b4, and you can see how the knight is suddenly coming under a discovered attack. This is, not something that white can afford here. So white plays b takes a5. We have rook takes a5, keeping the pin that way. White played knight to c5, and yeah, this sort of, over the last move, we sort of saw how Gukesh started to outplay his opponent. Like, queen d5 is just a really nice move, realizing that if white does take on d5, you take back, and yeah, you're hitting the knight and you're hitting the pawn at the same time, so white just loses material. White played to move queen e2, trying to keep more tension in the position. Yeah, someone's trying to mess me in the background, but priorities. Yeah, this position here is just a full pawn up for black. We can even see the bishop's actually kind of a good defender in a way. Like, if white does play knight e6 trying to grab the pawn, you do have bishop e6, rook e6, and now there's a very nice tactic for black, which obviously Gukesh had seen in advance. Then you can play the move rook takes f3. You can't take with the queen because then the rook is hanging, but after gf3, knight d4, then there's a fork, three ways that, white just loses a piece and the game is over, basically. So this is why white basically is losing in this position. Well, maybe the computer would survive as white, but I don't think anyone else would. Yeah, black's played rook fa7. The rook comes to a2 like this. And yeah, like we saw before, knight e6 is just not really a thing here. Like, you can go rook a1 and just, use white's weak back rank against him here. The game ultimately concluded g4, take, and Gukesh's technique was very good in this game, actually. Knight h6 maybe isn't the top engine line, but it keeps an eye on g4 and does keep control. So bishop g3. Rook a2 is probably the most obvious move here, but e5 is actually maybe even better, where you just use the fact that, well, the pawn is needed to defend the c5 knight, and without that fulcrum in the center, everything just kind of collapses for white. The game ending take, rook e5. And I mean, at this point, yeah, once they make the time control, it's pretty clear, yeah, that white just is down a piece for nothing. A few more moves were played, but the result wasn't really in doubt. Bishop h3, bishop d6, take, rook g7, and yeah, white just doesn't have anything here. After 94, very nice finishing move of queen takes a4. Always a flourish to finish a game with a queen sack, and white resigned because rook e4, rook a1 is just going to be a back rank mate with the black bishops covering the escape squares. Yeah, this was a really nice game by Gukesh. Like, definitely, even today, it's still one of his most brilliant wins, actually, where it's a good indication of his style also from, like, the opening point of view, where he's not really trying to equalize out the opening with black or, like, memorize lots of engine variations, but just kind of wants to get an interesting position with some scope to outplay the opponent. And yeah, in this game, we even saw him like outplaying, Caruana, who's currently the world number 2 with the black pieces. Yeah, just very, very impressive. And historically, this was also the game that gave Gukesh an 8 out of 8 starting win streak at this 2022 Chennai Olympiad, which is kind of fitting in a way if you think about it, because, well, Caruana himself was a player who, popularized the term like of, doing a Caruana when you start with 7 out of 7 after his 7 out of 7 start in the 2014 Sinkfield Cup. So kind of some, I guess, poetry of sorts that, Gukesh should achieve like an 8 out of 8 by beating Caruana with black. But yeah, very, very, very nice game, of course. And actually, you could even say, like, also as significant, I think this game was actually the turning point where Caruana, started to like work much, much harder on his chess and, got back over to 800, after, in 23rd, 23. So, yeah, without this loss, maybe we wouldn't have even seen, like, the, Super Caruana, like, playing so well in 2023. But, okay, I digress a little bit. Anyway, yeah, that was this one for the series. And, yeah, the next game I have is actually going to be a Gukesh win against Carlsen. So, it's another reason for you guys to subscribe to make sure you get the notification to, see his very nice win against Carlson coming up in the next couple of days. Also, let me know in the comments, like, what was your favorite move or favorite moment from this game? And if you have any sort of Gukesh games you really want me to go through, you can also let me know that as well. That's all for this training. See you in the next one, and until then, take care.